Welcome back to my series on chess opening theory. In this video, I'll be taking a look at a number of sidelines in the Winawer variation of the French defense. So the French defense is when we have the moves e4, e6, d4, d5, and the Winawer is when white now plays knight to c3 and black plays bishop to b4. So I said that I'm going to be taking a look at a number of sidelines, and well, you might be wondering, how am I going to do that when I'm only going to be showing one game? And the answer is through the power of opening transpositions. So today I'm going to be looking at the moves queen to d3, queen to e2, and queen to f3, since in all of these cases, the best move for black is to just take on e4. Or at the very least, this is a very good move for black to play. It's one of the best. And in all of these cases, regardless of where the queen is, the best move for white is to take back with the queen. And notice that it doesn't matter if the queen was on f3, e2, or d3. This is the same position in all cases. One important thing to note is that this argument does not really apply to queen g4, which is a different sideline. Like, against queen g4, I might cover this in another video, since this is its own stuff, but black should play differently. Like, knight to f6 is the best move here, if I recall correctly. Like, basically, don't take this guy right away. But anyway, with queen to d3, it's actually a bit unclear what the idea behind this move is. It might just be to defend this pawn. Like, one thing to be aware of if you play the b6 Winawer is that if you now play b6, this is kind of an opening trap because black would now lose a minor piece. So be sure to keep that in mind if you like playing b6 instead of playing c5 against e5. And in my opinion, queen to f3 is probably the most interesting of these queen moves, simply because it doesn't block the light square bishop, and, you know, white might prepare to play bishop d2 and maybe castle queenside. Right, but, you know, that's not what's going to happen in our games, since we're just going to take. After white takes back, best move for black is a pretty intuitive one. Just develop, hit the queen with tempo. And here, there is really only one move by white that can give us any sort of challenge, and that is the move queen to h4. Like, white has to defend this pawn. It's a pretty important pawn. And if white puts their queen on, like, d3 or e3 or f4, then that's just a little bit passive. It doesn't really present many problems for black. Whereas queen to h4 is the move that pretty much everybody plays here, as it has some ideas of maybe launching a kingside attack on black. Like, maybe go after the pawn on h7, that kind of stuff. Like bishop d3, maybe g4, g5, or maybe bishop g5, you know, stuff like that. So in this position, there are a number of decent choices for black, a number of playable moves. Like in Nishigiri, he prefers the move pawn to b6, but I personally prefer move pawn to c5, which is a move that we play in a lot of other variations. The idea is just to strike at the center, just put pressure on white's center and all that. Go for some dynamics. This is kind of a pawn sacrifice, at least the way that we're playing it. If white does not, you know, accept the pawn sacrifice, if white instead goes for knight to f3, then we just immediately take, and after white takes back with either the knight or the queen, we just trade over here and just go for some dynamics, like maybe castle, maybe do something else. Basically play against these three isolated pawns on the queen side. Alright, but white almost always accepts the pawn sacrifice. So d takes c5, and now we can ruin white's pawn structure. And even though white's pawn structure is ruined, white is not losing by any means, because white does have the two bishops, and white does have some open lines, including the b file over here. as well as, the queen is out. Maybe white can go for some kind of kingside attack because black really doesn't want to castle queenside, given that we've got these open lines over here. So there are two moves in this position that the engine likes, that the engine approves of. The first one is castling kingside. This move has never been played in like the Lee Chess Masters database. And in ChessBase, I think I only found one game, and there white didn't play all that well, so I didn't feel like that would be a good choice for this video. Even though castling kingside is a move that I do think is okay, even if it does look a little scary because of the potential kingside attack. The other move that the engine approves of is queen to a5, and this move is the most popular move in this position. And I personally don't like queen to a5. This is more of just a preference. Although, there's also the fact that when I looked for games, many of the games were games where if black won, it was because white missed some tactical resource. Like, white very often missed a chance to win material, like win a knight or win an exchange, stuff like that. And so I thought, I don't really like that. And it wasn't even like, oh, you sacrifice an exchange and you have so much compensation that the engine loves your position. It's like, no, the engine wants white to take the material. The engine says white is winning if they take the material. So that's why I did not, pick a game featuring queen a5. And I personally don't like this move because it encourages white to instead change plans and play queen to b4. This does take white's queen away from the kingside action, does, make kingside attacks more difficult, but at the same time, white very often is able to kind of cramp black a bit, because another important dynamic in these positions is that the pawn on c5, while it is isolated, it is also very annoying because it is controlling some important squares in black's territory and making it more difficult for, black to move their stuff, like making it a bit more difficult to get this bishop out because pawn to b6 will of course be met by c takes b6, stuff like that. So I don't like queen a5, queen b4, even though the engine does approve of it. It only gives white a very tiny edge here. Instead, the move that I like, which is the move that happened in the game, is a move that's very intuitive and is a move that might fly under the radar if you only look at things with an engine, and that is the move queen to c7. Now here, the engine does give white a slight edge, but in order to actually get this edge, I think white actually has to memorize quite a bit of theory. Like, this is kind of a sideline within a sideline. Even though this move is a pretty obvious one, and even if the engine doesn't like it, the idea is just black wants to get rid of this annoying c5 pawn, and black is also threatening to give a check on e5 and maybe go after the pawn on c3, assuming that white doesn't play knight e2 defending it. It's, stuff like that. So I quite like this move. It doesn't encourage white to play queen b4 because black would now have time to play like knight to c6, stuff like that. And in this position, white now played the move knight to f3, and I think I should now introduce the players. So with the white pieces, we have woman Grandmaster Anastasia Karlovich, who is from the Ukraine. She is also a chess journalist. And with the black pieces, we have Angelis Teloudis, who is an untitled player from Greece, but I suspect that, at least at the time that this game was played, like in this tournament, I suspect that he's actually, at the very least, national master strength. Like, I think his rating in Greece might have been like 2295 or 2200, something like that. And he actually did very well in this tournament. Like, this particular game happened at the Greek Summer Cup in 2008, and these two players faced each other in the second last round. It was a 9-round tournament, and black managed to win this game. And not only that, but black finished tied for 6th in a pool of, I believe it was about 80 players or something like that. And basically, black finished with 6 points out of 9, and white finished with 5.5 points out of 9. Black finished tied for 6th with a bunch of other players, including a grandmaster, and white finished tied for 15th. So that kind of gives you an idea of just how many players were playing at this event. And black played a very good game. White did not play badly this game by any means. And without further ado, I think we'll get on with the game. More information about the players and the game can be found in the video description. So in this position, black could play the move queen takes c5. I think that move would be just fine. But black decides to instead be a little bit more patient and play knight bd7. Because this pawn isn't really going anywhere. Like, if white defends it, black has 2 attackers on it and can take. And if white pushes to c6, black can still just play like queen takes c6, stuff like that. So, in this position, white now played the move bishop to g5, which is a pretty intuitive move, just developing a piece. And we already see that, if white hasn't memorized a bunch of theory, that white's so-called slight advantage kind of just vanishes right away. Black now played the move queen takes c5, which is a very intuitive move, just regaining the sacrificed pawn and getting ready to play against, white's weaknesses on the queen side over here. White now played queen to d4, and black now played a move that was pretty cool, pretty interesting, although a little bit unsound, which was knight to e4, or, going for some activity, getting a bit aggressive. But in this position, what white should have now done is kind of simplify a little into an endgame. After queen takes g7, black could play queen takes c3 with check, defending the rook over here and, trading pawns. Queen takes c3, knight takes c3, bishop to d2, and then maybe a move like knight to e4. Like, this is a very long line. I know, all this stuff. Like, according to the engine, white, is winning, but it can be tricky to actually evaluate all this and basically determine why is white winning. White is winning because of the 2 bishops, of course. Like, they can be very valuable in the endgame. Like, basically, white should not allow black to trade the bishops, or trade the knight for one of the bishops, I should say. And then basically just play very actively. And then, bishop d3, knight d5, trying to trade stuff. And then trading like this is okay. Endgames can be pretty complicated, but white has very active pieces here. And there would still be a game to be played, but this is not what happened in the game. Instead, what happened in the game was after black played knight to e4, white played bishop to e3, just, defending and moving the bishop away from where it was being attacked. Black now played queen takes c3 check, essentially winning a pawn through the process here. Takes. We have bishop to d4, going to win that pawn back. Knight to e4, bishop takes g7, rook to g8. And here, this isn't as good as the other line I showed, as basically black's pieces are the ones that are pretty active now. We have bishop to b2, on to a6, controlling this square over here, maybe getting ready to move this knight. We have bishop to d3, hitting this knight over here. We have knight d to c5, getting this guy into the game, getting ready to maybe play bishop here and maybe there or something, stuff like that. We have bishop to d4, rook takes g2, king to e2, knight takes d3, c takes d3, knight to g5. And now if we look at the pawn count, what we see is that I believe black is up 1 pawn, although I am pretty bad at counting. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 versus 1, 2, 3, 4, and then this extra guy over here. So, yep, black is up 1 pawn. We have pawn to h4, just trying to kick this knight away. Knight takes f3, king takes f3, rook g6. Its position still has quite a bit of life in it. Pawn to h5, rook to g5. We have rook a g1, getting this rook into the game and trying to trade away black's best piece, which is this rook. Black's other pieces aren't really participating. Black should not trade because, you know, this rook is kind of awesome. We have rook to f5 check, king to e3, pawn to e5, trying to maybe get this bishop out. We have rook to g8 check, king to d7. And, oh yeah, getting the bishop out would actually be quite premature because, yeah, don't drop this guy, you know? Anyway, bishop to b6, trying to cramp black a bit, make it very hard for black to get, you know, their pieces into the game. King to c6, basically telling white to get their bishop out of there. Here, white puts the bishop on a5, which is really the only square it could go to. Pawn to b6, black's getting ready to maybe play bishop to b7. That's one way of dealing with this pin, is just move the bishop where it defends the rook. We have rook to c1 check. Black needs to move their king back, otherwise, you know, this bishop will be lost. Or does black have to do that? No. Black plays king b5 because moving the king back would, of course, drop this pawn. We have bishop to d2, bishop to b7, and now in this position, rook to b1 check, king to c6, rook to g4, and now here the engine wants black to play move king to c7. It's a bit unclear as to why. Maybe just open up this guy. I have this guy get into the game, maybe cover this important square, stuff like that. But instead, black played the move rook takes h5, which I think is a perfectly intuitive move. I think that moves just fine. You know, basically this pawn is a valuable resource now. It's an outside pass pawn that gives black some good winning chances. And now, in this position, white now played the move rook to c4 check. The engine really does not like this, and we're soon going to see why. The engine instead wanted rook to g7, which is a move that is very intuitive, as rooks are very strong on the 7th rank. They have lots of targets to hit. It's actually pretty difficult for black to defend the pawn on f7 and the pawn on h7 at the same time. Black would kind of have to play passively with like rook to f8, for example. So that was probably the real idea behind king to c7, why it wanted that instead of playing rook takes h5 back in this position, since this pawn might not really be going anywhere, at least not anywhere soon. And it can be more important to have active pieces than to just grab pawns. But I personally think taking this pawn was just fine, just from a practical standpoint. Anyway, white did not play rook to g7, which would hit all these guys at once. White instead went for rook to c4 check, and we're going to soon see why this move is not so great. Like, it does look like this move wins this pawn over here, but there is something more important than material, and something that's even more important than piece activity. So in this position, black now played the move king to d7. White now plays the move rook takes b6. Black plays the move rook to h3 check. And already this is looking really, really nasty. So if you want, you can pause the video and just try to figure out why white did not play king to e2. You know, that's a pretty important thing to check, pretty important line to see. I will reveal the reason in 3, 2, 1. So the reason why king to e2 was not played is because bishop to f3 is actually checkmate in 2. The king would love to go to d1 so that it could block the mate with bishop to e1, but that's just not possible. The king can only go to one of these two squares, so here, for example, and then boom, it's mate. As a result, in this position, white is actually forced to give up another pawn with pawn to f3, and black now decided to save their bishop with the move bishop takes f3. This is a very nice move because it does have an immediate threat, which is to just give a discover check over here and win the rook. And really, in this position, there are not all that many great moves for white. Right, like white played the move rook to c1, which on the surface looks okay, but is not the best move, but at the same time, the best move still doesn't save the game. So the engine wants rook to c5, and then after bishop to h1 check, king to f2, rook to g8. Black just has a pretty nasty attack on white. Right, like white is probably going to be getting mated soon, probably with a sequence involving like maybe rook here, stuff like that. That's we would have rook to h6 is what the engine wants white to now play. Rook takes h6, bishop takes h6, king to e6. Black would have a outside pass pawn, and then the line continues a bit, but this is not what happened in the game. Black is still winning here, thanks mainly to this pawn. But, there would still be a game to be played. Like, Black would have to prove that they will win this. Instead, the move that White did play loses almost immediately. We have rook to c1, saving the rook from this check over here. But Black plays rook to g8, as before. And really, there isn't a nice way out of this for White. Right, this is very scary. According to the engine, basically bishop to e1 is the best move, but this very likely just loses some material. And bye-bye bishop. That is how the game would continue if White played bishop to e1. But instead, maybe White was low on time. We are getting very close to move 40. We are on move 37. White played the move bishop to b4. And Black now just played a similar idea. If you want, you can pause the video and try to see how the game ended. I will reveal the sequence of moves in 3, 2, 1. So Black now played bishop to d5 with check. And White now played king to d2. Black now played rook to h2 with check. And here it's important to note that if White now plays king to c3, then Black will actually just win material. Well, like basically there isn't any, in fact, win quite a bit of material. The king can't actually move anywhere right now. The only move is bishop c5, rook takes, king moves here, and then bye-bye rook. So as a result, back in this position, instead of White going king to c3, White played king to d1, which isn't all that much better. Or sorry, not king to e1. This is king to d1. I often mix up e and d. And Black now played rook to g1 with check. And while White does have this move, bishop to e1, White instead chose to resign because bishop to f3 would be mate. So overall, a very well-played game by Black. Like, this sideline within a sideline is pretty complicated, but it is one that I think is pretty cool, and it is a very good practical choice against a titled player because they might not have looked at it. They might not have considered queen to c7. They might have only considered looking at moves that, that the engine says are good. Like, that's an important blind spot to check. Like, you shouldn't just look at engine moves, you should look at moves that a human might play in the position. So, anyway, that'll do it for this game. I hope that you enjoyed. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Bye for now.